Mercedes is one team that has found itself in a sticky situation with the regulations being modified for the 2023 season, and they're actively working towards getting themselves out of it and up in the front. After the pace improvement we've seen in Australia, a race in which they didn't bring upgrades but changed the setup of the car, we're led to believe that Mercedes will bring much more in the following weekends, and that will result in Hamilton or Russell potentially winning races down the road. Now, a recent statement came from the team regarding this matter, and we have some good news for all Mercedes fans watching this video, so join us as we unveil it to you. Even prior to the first race in Bahrain, Mercedes knew that the concept of the W14 had to be changed, and that's why the Brackley-based squad anticipated a difficult start to the season. That's exactly what happened in the first race, and while the improvement in Jeddah was evident, it wasn't comparable to Australia, where Russell and Hamilton finished P2 and P3 in the qualifying session and almost grabbed a double podium finish, had it not been for Russell's reliability issues. But from where they were in Bahrain, where they weren't able to fight with Aston Martin or Ferrari, to being better than both of those teams in the last race, at least speaking about Hamilton is a huge improvement. Keep in mind that Mercedes is yet to unveil the new concept of the car, one that they'll be able to utilise perfectly in the wind tunnels and the CFDs, given the fact that they have around 17% more time to spend here than their main rival, Red Bull. Although the pace from Red Bull is still at around 0.6 per second, and Wolf has practically written off this season in terms of fights for the championship, we may see some interesting developments in the following period. The team is now convinced that the package they'll bring to the W14, one that's supposed to happen in Imola, will definitely help them close the gap to Red Bull and, who knows, maybe even fight for the championship at one point of the season. Unlike 2022, it only took a couple of races for Mercedes to figure out what needed to be changed, and this time the cards that they've been dealt for the remainder of the 2023 campaign are looking good. It seems like Mercedes knows how to extract more performance out of the W14, and before we go to that, let us support our argument with Russell's words in terms of whether or not the W14 can be a different beast on the grid. Although Hamilton said that he doesn't feel connected with the W14 and that it does certain things that he doesn't want it to do, Russell had a bit of a different approach to this situation. The young Briton was able to get the maximum out of the car, even though it's vastly different from the W13 in terms of having a stronger front end, and even though he also struggles with it, he never said that the car can't compete for wins. Hamilton didn't say it either, but his approach is much more pessimistic compared to his teammate, as Russell went on to add, "It's comparable to riding a horse. A Mercedes is a faster horse than a Williams, but it's not just about speed. Riding a horse from A to B and it doesn't zig is like sitting in a Formula One car that suits your driving style. One merges into another. At the moment, however, we have a lame horse. We know that it has a lot of performance in it, but it's not happy that someone wants to ride it, and the way of riding style does not suit him either. It still has its own head, which sometimes runs the risk of throwing you off. We still have to get used to each other and develop it so that it becomes fast and tame." Therefore, it's evident that the hope that Mercedes have in terms of turning the car into a much more competitive machinery compared to the W13 is present. So what are the new upgrades that will boost the silver arrows to the front of the grid? Russell spoke about the Australia outcome, as he's given his fans a lot to look forward to, adding that this race is not a false dawn like last year's Brazilian GP. Although Aston Martin and Red Bull are much better in terms of managing the tyres and getting the most out of the car, Mercedes found some pace and managed to bring Hamilton home at P2, with the Briton not presenting a real threat to Verstappen up front. So some of the major hits that Mercedes has taken in terms of developing their car to be a different beast is the impossibility to work on redesigning the chassis, which is essential for a complete transition to a Red Bull-like concept. Keep in mind that Wolff admitted that he wouldn't care if the W14 looks a lot like the RB19 in the near future, and that the team simply went wrong in the direction over the winter. However, discovering this before the W14 actually hit the track meant that the team didn't waste any more weeks of time and money, and as we said earlier in the video, we may see a competitive Mercedes sooner rather than later, or more precisely, in the next 5 races. According to the team, the goal is to proceed with a partial change of concept, which will certainly be limited by the budget cap, but will certainly allow Mercedes to evaluate the progress they've made in the wind tunnel on the track. One of the biggest limitations, however, is the team's inability to work on the chassis. This isn't a complete limitation, and one that wouldn't allow Mercedes to extract more performance out of the car. When talking about this matter before the Australian GP, Andrew Chauvelin, the trackside engineer for Mercedes, added, "At the moment, we have many plans to improve the performance of the W14 in the next 5 races. This is a short but very strong message, and it left fans wondering where the W14 would find all of this pace, since it's not in the complete redesign of the car. For starters, an important package will be brought to the W14 before the Spanish GP, and will not be limited to the developments that we're expecting at Imola. Given that Mercedes are practically the second fastest team after the Australian GP, we could very well see a car that will fight for wins as soon as Barcelona." Of course, we're expecting Mercedes to be competitive in Imola as well, because this would be the next big event for the Brackley-based squad in terms of revealing their new concept. But focusing on the short term, updates have already been planned for several weeks, which, according to Toto Wolff, will reshape a lot of aerodynamic surface. The biggest aerodynamic surface that Mercedes is currently struggling with is, yeah, you guessed it right, the side pods. Before Imola, however, in the 2 previous racing weekends in Baku and Miami, Mercedes could bring updates that revolve around the mechanics of the W14 and the cooling process, and this will partly prepare the huge upgrade that will happen to the car in Imola. The team has worked on these small things since Bahrain, but we're yet to see the fruits being harvested in the following races, with Imola and Barcelona being set as events in which we're supposed to see massive improvement in race pace from the W14. Toto Wolff, however, wanted to tone the expectations down and said that although he loves where his team is currently moving, the team is 6 to 12 months behind in terms of development. As he went on to say, "We're missing 6 to 12 months of development, which is how long it took to really understand what was happening to our concept. This means that we now have to double our development speed." Now, what are the realistic expectations from the new upgrades from Mercedes? Although the car could turn out to be a championship-winning one after all, with Hamilton saying after the Australian GP that the gap to Red Bull can definitely be caught up to in the following races, Mercedes may have switched the focus to 2024 early in the season. While this doesn't mean that they've given up on the 2023 season and winning more races or establishing the second position in the Constructors' Championship, it would still be a disappointing development of events after Ferrari and Aston Martin may not be as good as we expected them to be during the pre-season testing in Bahrain. With this in mind, Mercedes may be our only hope that we're not going to have a monotonous season in which Verstappen will do what Hamilton did from 2014 to 2020, and that's why we're even more eager to see what kind of upgrades Mercedes plans on the W14 in the following 5 races. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comments below.